Hey guys, just a really quick disclaimer for this video. At the time of recording this, I wasn't feeling great, so probably gonna sound a little scratchy and strange, so sorry. On this episode of Warships, a class of destroyers designed to serve the Third Reich. The Top 1936A destroyer, or the Type 1936A destroyer for my American audience, also known as the C-23 class, or the Z-23 class, again for my English-speaking audience, were a class of 15 destroyers built for Nazi Germany's Kriegsmarine between 1938 and 1943. Known as the Narvik class to the Allies, they were a development of the Type 1936. Like all German destroyers during World War II, they were all unnamed, known only by their hull numbers, Z-23 to Z-39. And from here on out, I'm going to be using the English version, the English pronunciation of their hull numbers. The ship displaced between 2,543 and 2,657 long tons standard. The Narviks were 127 meters long, had a 12-meter beam, and a draft between 4 and 5 meters. The ship was propelled at a speed of 36 knots by two geared steam turbines producing 69,000 shaft horsepower. The Narviks had a range of about 2,600 miles at a speed of 19 knots. They were crewed by between 321 and 335 men. They were armed with 5.9-inch guns arranged in one of two arrangements, either 4 single mounts, one fore, one midships, and a pair superfiring aft, or one twin mount and 3 single mounts in the same arrangement. For anti-aircraft defense, the ship had 2 twin 37mm and 5 to 10 20mm guns. The Narviks also had 2 quad 21-inch torpedo tubes mounted amidships, 4 depth charge launchers, and 60 mines. This armament made these ships more like light cruisers, as usually destroyers didn't have guns larger than 5 inches. The twin turret arrangement was how the ship was designed, but the turret wasn't ready upon the launching of the class, so the early 1936As had the single gun forward of the bridge. The hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments and was fitted with a double bottom amidships that ran along a little less than half the length of the ship. The crew consisted of between 11 and 15 officers and 305 to 320 sailors. When serving as a flotilla flagship, an additional 4 officers and 19 sailors were assigned. The 2 Wagner geared steam turbines each turned a single 3-bladed 3.2 to 3.35 meter propeller. Steam was provided from 6 high-pressure Wagner water tube boilers with superheaters that operated at about 1,029 psi and a temperature between 450 and 480 degrees Celsius. The ship carried 822 long tons of fuel oil, giving it its 2,600 nautical mile range. All of the destroyers in the first batch of 8 had their guns arranged as previously stated, except for the Z-28, which had 2 mounts fore and aft. Z-24, Z-25, and Z-29 were later outfitted with the twin 5.9-inch turret mount. The single mounts were actually not turrets, rather they were exposed, protected only by a gun shield, and the rear of the gun was open. All of the 1936 mob ships received a twin turret, except for the Z-31, but it had one fitted later. The single mounts could elevate 30 degrees and could depress 10 degrees. While the turret retained the 10 degrees of gun depression, instead it could elevate to 65 degrees. I would go into muzzle velocity, but I'm sure none of you are interested, but if you are, let me know in the comments and I'll make another video. Or you can wait for Drakenfell to make a video on these ships and go from there. The 2 37mm guns were mounted abreast of the aft funnel and had a maximum elevation of 85 degrees, and were capable of knocking down an enemy aircraft at a height of 6,800 meters. They had a horizontal range of about 8,500 meters, elevated at 37.5 degrees. The 20s were mounted in quadruple mounts, along with a single that had a ceiling of 3,700 meters and a horizontal range of 4,800 meters. The torpedo tubes were mounted amidships and came with 2 reloads for each mount, carrying a total of 24 G7A torpedoes. These ship killers had a 300-kilo warhead and 3 speed range settings: 14,000 meters at 30 knots, 8,000 meters at 40 knots, or 6,000 meters at 44 knots. 4 depth charge launchers and mine rails could be fitted on the rear deck. Gruppenhochgerät passive hydrophones were fitted to detect submarines, along with the FUMO 24-25 radar set above the bridge. Despite their impressive stats, they suffered from reliability issues of their high-pressure steam engines, as well as seakeeping problems in rough seas due to the design of the bow and the heavy forward artillery. The first 8 Narviks were laid down between 1938 and 1940, numbered Z-23 through Z-30. Z-31 to Z-39 were classed as Zerstörer 1936A Mob and were laid down in 1940 and 1941, and were slightly larger, as well as having some internal modifications to address both the long construction times and some of the design flaws. The first ship in the class, Z-23, was laid down on November 15, 1938, and commissioned on September 15, 1940. The ship saw service throughout the war, first as an escort to such ships as the Admiral Hipper, Admiral Scheer, and Lutzow, as well as the Bismarck and the Tirpitz. She also served in the Battle of the Bay of Biscay. She was damaged by a bomb on August 12, 1944, and decommissioned later that month. She was taken by the French and renamed Leopard. She was scrapped in 1951. Z-24 was laid down on January 2, 1939, and commissioned on October 26, 1940. She was sunk by British bombers near Le Verdun on August 25, 1944. Z-25 was laid down on February 15, 1939, and commissioned on November 30, 1940. She too was taken by the French after the war and renamed Hirsch. She was scrapped in 1958. Z-26 was laid down on April 1, 1939, and commissioned on January 11, 1941. She was sunk by the British cruiser Trinidad and the destroyer Eclipse on March 29, 1942, while escorting convoy PQ-13. Z-27 was laid down on December 27, 1939, and commissioned on February 26, 1941. She was sunk in the Battle of the Bay of Biscay by the light cruisers Glasgow and Enterprise on December 28, 1943. Z-28 was laid down on October 30, 1939, and commissioned on August 9, 1941. She was sunk by British bombers near Sassnitz on March 3, 1945. Z-29 was laid down on March 21, 1940, and commissioned on June 25, 1941. She was taken by the British after the war and subsequently given to the U.S. Navy. She was scuttled near Jutland on December 16, 1946. Z-30 was laid down on April 15, 1940, and commissioned on November 15, 1941. She was taken by Norway after the war and subsequently given to the British, who used her as a target ship. She was scrapped in 1949. Z-31, the first of the 1936A Mob variant, was laid down on September 1, 1940, and commissioned on April 11, 1942. She was taken by France after World War II and renamed Marcel, being scrapped in 1958. Z-32 was laid down on November 1, 1940, and commissioned on September 15, 1942. She was damaged in a battle with the Canadian destroyers Haida and Huron on June 9, 1944, during the Battle of Ushant, and beached. She was later destroyed by air attacks. Z-33 was laid down on December 22, 1940, and commissioned on February 6, 1942. She was taken by the Soviet Union after the war and renamed Provorny. She was sunk as a target in 1961. Z-34 was laid down on January 15, 1941, and commissioned on June 5, 1943. She was taken by the U.S. after World War II and scuttled near Jutland on March 26, 1946. Now we skip ahead in number sequence to Z-37, Z-38, and Z-39, all laid down in 1940. Z-37 was commissioned on July 16, 1942. She collided with the Z-32 on January 1, 1944, and was badly damaged. She was decommissioned on the 24th of August, 1944, and scuttled in Bordeaux. She was fully scrapped in 1949. Z-38 was commissioned on March 20, 1943. She was taken by the British after the war and renamed Nansak. She was used as a test ship, testing the effects of underwater explosions. The ship broke in half, to the surprise of the test facilitators during the test, and was scrapped in 1949 and 1950. Z-39, the last of the class, was commissioned on August 21, 1943. She was also taken by the British and subsequently given to the U.S. Navy. She was renamed DD-939 and used as a test ship. She was then given to France in 1947 and used as a spare parts ship for other French vessels of German origin. She was scrapped in 1964. If you want more information on a specific ship of the class, let me know in the comments and I'll make a special episode for them. Although I probably will end up making one for them all anyway, but if you tell me in the comments, I'll put it on priority. Anyway, that concludes the objective part of this video. Now on to my opinion. Okay, so my opinion on the Type 1936A, I mean, in general, they're pretty good designed ships. I think, like most German destroyers, they could have been smaller, more in line with the Fletcher class. for instance. But they're not. There's nothing wrong with them. They just feel like they're all flotilla leader destroyers, which is, I don't know. Seems like it's a little bit of a waste of material and money. I mean, if the ships had been smaller, perhaps they could have gotten another one or two ships out of the class. 5.9-inch guns are kind of a little bit much for a destroyer. 5-inch guns seem to work just fine. But then again, the Germans weren't using their destroyers in as much of the escort way that they would be that most other countries used destroyers in. So I'm sure they were adequate, designed for the German Kriegsmarine. As far as the role they were designed to play, they were probably designed to play a more heavy escort role than American destroyers of contemporary design would be used for. But as far as actual destroyer, design goes, they probably should have been a little bit smaller and more Fletcher-like. Although 36 knots is not something to sneeze at for a ship that size. I mean, they are certainly heavier than the Fletcher, I believe, by a fairly significant margin. But they are pretty much just as fast, or competitively fast. So they're no slouches. I don't know. It's like, I feel like if you're going to make it the destroyer that fast, make it smaller and harder to hit and better at like escorting and like hit and run torpedo attacks. Or if you're going to make it that big, make it a little bit slower and more of a brawler. Heavier armor, more 6-inch guns, something like that. Personally, that's my opinion on them, although objectively, there's nothing wrong with the design. It's a perfectly functional design. But that's my opinion on it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully by the next video that I record, I will not be sick. Which would just be nice because my voice won't sound like a dying man. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, maybe a comment. Subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. I'm kind of trying to keep uploads weekly, but life is hard, so we'll see. But subscribe so you don't miss any uploads whenever they are. And that about does it for me. So I'll see y'all in the next video.